So we have to say, what does success really mean to us? And can we start doing that now?
Yeah.
And what can we do now? Because as soon as we start feeling that success, some of that overwhelm, some of this stress, some of these other things will start to drop.
Mm-hmm.
They'll also help us start lining up with what are the things that we want to continue to do. Because really, I think burnout is a whole lot about energy.
Yeah.
More than anything else.
Are you feeling overwhelmed, stuck, or uncertain about how to grow your business without sacrificing what really matters most? Welcome to The Business You Really Want, the show for women ready to build a sustainable, fully aligned business. Aligned with what, you ask? You, your values, your life. Seriously, it is possible. I'm Tonya Kubo, and along with business advisor extraordinaire Gwen Bortner, we're here to show you how. Do you look successful on the outside, but actually feel like you're drowning on the inside? Most of us have been there. If we are business owners or professionals, many of us who are women, if you are doing all the right things and your business appears to be thriving, but privately you are wondering how much longer can you keep going before you crash and burn? This episode was designed with you in mind. Today, Gwen and I are tackling the hidden, or I would argue not so hidden, epidemic of entrepreneurial burnout. It is the topic of every single business circle I am in. And you know what? Success that looks good from the outside, this is something I learned from Gwen. Success that looks good from the outside but feels unsustainable from the inside is actually not success. It is a countdown to burnout. So today, Gwen and I are going to show you how to create a business that doesn't just perform well, but actually feels good to run day after day after day. Gwen, I need you to kick us off by helping us to understand that disconnect, because you're the person who introduced me to it. This disconnect between external success markers and the experience we feel inside. Why are so many entrepreneurs finding themselves in this position where they don't align?
I think it really, social media is not my favorite anyway. So it's fun to be able to blame social media. And I am going to blame social media to some degree. But it is not only social. But the fact that social media is always presenting, I am successful in these very specific external ways, that we think that that is what success has to look like. And so we align our businesses, our activities, all of the things to get that particular definition of success. And I say it's not only social media because sometimes it's family pressure. Sometimes it's cultural pressure. Sometimes it's industry description kinds of pressure. I've seen it in all sorts of ways where that other group is kind of has defined what success is supposed to look like. And so we feel like if we don't do that, we're not achieving success. But often it's not what really is driving our definition of success. And most of us don't take the time to determine what that is. And the other issue around it is external success is way easier to define. It hits those SMART goals really, really easy. If they're specific and they're measurable, and all of those things. I think we have the episode where I say sometimes SMART goals are dumb. It's it's kind of that thing where SMART goals are easy to measure. And so often that's what we focus on, even though that's not really defining success for us. And so, the classic is if you don't have a 7-figure business, it's not successful. Says who? Says who? Right? So there's my first thought.
Okay. So
Ask
yeah.
more, say more.
Okay. So you're saying, so really the disconnect comes from comparison. That's what I just heard. Whether you're comparing your reality to what people claim their reality is on social media or in other public facing areas, where you're comparing your reality to what friends, family, people around you say your reality should be, or you're comparing your reality to these goals that you're encouraged to set. And I would even argue, I love, the whole idea that SMART goals can be dumb. Mainly because, right, it's like how often we're told, well, that's not a goal. That's not a goal. And you're like, well, it's the best I can do right now. Like, seriously. So I love how it really comes down to comparison.
And it's not just comparison. It's comparison against something that doesn't actually resonate with you.
So here's the honest question. How do you know? Like how? Because I think some of us are so ingrained. We're so surrounded by this messaging. We don't know that it's not us, right? We don't know that it's not in alignment with who we are, what we really want. So how do we figure that piece out?
So I'd love to give you like, oh, all you have to do is, and there kind of isn't all you have to do is, but the thing is, all you have to do is actually really hard. It's simple, but it's not easy, right? And it really is to be asking yourself, does this really motivate me? Why does this matter to me? Why is this actually important? Is this lining up with the things that I say that I want in my life? Right? I think I don't know if I've shared this example here or not. I've shared it a lot recently where I was having a conversation with someone and I made up an example that I, totally made up in my head because I know that this happens to people. And she started crying because what I had described was actually her life and the downside of it. She was chasing the 7-figure dream because that's what she was supposed to chase so that she could spend more time with her kids. And, the list went on and on and on. But she did it all during the time that the kids were home. And so in chasing this dream that wasn't really the dream, what she wanted to do was to be there for her kids and spend time with her kids. In doing so, she was not there for her kids and did not spend time with her kids. And she really has a very bad relationship with her, 20 to 30-year-old children now because they're still resentful of her working the way that she was working to achieve this dream that she could have just had if she wasn't chasing this kind of ethereal dream of I'm not successful if I don't have a 7-figure business.
Yeah. Oh, it's so interesting because I think there's a lot of areas in life, right, where we squander the gift of what we really want in pursuit of what we really want.
Well, and often what we think we're supposed to really want.
Yeah. So I think I definitely want to leave people with some solutions here, but I feel like before we can solve the burnout cycle, before we can say, hey, here's how to get yourself out of the burnout cycle, the self-reflections you gave were pretty good. But also, if you're not even there yet, right? Again, back to you're so entrenched in the external messaging, you don't even know what you know or what you feel. I'm wondering if maybe there's some symptoms that we could be looking at, some warning signs that the success we're experiencing is unsustainable. Like maybe that would be a good place to start.
Well, so the first symptom, which no one talks about because it's the nature of the symptom, is people see me as successful. They talk to me about my success, and I don't feel it internally for whatever reason. Okay. And I say whatever reason because that list can be a huge, huge list. I'm not going to try and put it into specific categories. I don't feel that way. I feel like I'm an imposter. If they only knew how screwed up my life was, if they only knew, how exhausted I was. But typically, and this is, I think, more of a woman thing than a man thing. I'm generalizing, so, not 100%. But I think women are less likely to say anything because we don't want to look ungrateful for that success that others are perceiving. So if we say, oh yeah, no, it looks great, but really it's this and this and this, it almost sounds like oh, that's so nice, but no, it's really not that. It sounds very, I don't know, kind of self-deprecating in a not helpful way. When what you're actually saying is, oh my God, this is not success. I know it looks like, but it doesn't come out like that. And we don't want to say that because it's like we're saying, yeah, you see that and you're wrong.
Right.
Right. And we don't typically accept. So that's the first one, like I said, and it's a symptom that others generally won't see because we're not talking about it.
Right.
Right. So I think that's the first symptom. But the other symptoms, which we may be talking about some, and I know that you travel in a lot of circles, so we can talk about what you're hearing that you're seeing. So we've had enough of these conversations. I know
Mm-hmm.
you can see the symptoms too. Is when you don't like your work anymore for whatever
Mm-hmm.
reason, right? When the thought of starting your day, talking to customers,
Mm-hmm.
whatever the things are that you do is just like, I do not want to have to do this again. I do not want to have to do this again. Or it's noon on Sunday and all you're thinking about is like, oh, in less than 24 hours, I have to be back at work. Right? Because we're entrepreneurs. We've
Mm-hmm.
typically designed our business around something that we care about, that we love. If that is starting to diminish in ongoing and long-term way, like there will be days. There are days, absolutely all of us are like, I do not want to work today.
Right.
Right. But when it's continual, sustained, it's over sustained over a long period of time, that's another symptom.
Mm-hmm.
Because what that usually means is that the business is going after something that isn't really your definition of success.
Yeah.
And so it's exhausting you, right? When your energy is not there. And when you're feeling like the business is driving you and you're not driving the business, I think that's
Mm-hmm.
another sign that you're potentially going after success that's not your definition of success.
Say a little bit more about that.
So when you feel like you have to do these things because,
Mm.
and I get to do these things because,
Mm-hmm.
and it is a tiny, tiny different word mindset. I've had people like, oh, and I had to pay all of these people versus I get to provide jobs for all these people,
Mm-hmm.
right? That is almost the exact same thing. And the situation is identical, but
Right.
how we're thinking about it is very, very different. Where it's
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm under this pressure and I don't know how I got here and I don't know why I'm doing it, versus I love the fact that I have built this organization that is able to do this in a way that is, creating jobs for
Mm-hmm.
all of these people, as opposed to I've got mouths to feed. Now, not that you don't ever have a day it's like, oh crap, I've got mouths to feed.
Right.
Right. But that it's constantly that versus the other. Right.
Right. Well, it's funny, maybe not funny, but an alternative perspective that came up in a conversation, right? So we're recording this. It's just after tax season for most people. I know some people do their taxes in October, but we're here in the spring. And I'm in a business group, and one person there is a former accountant, and other people are entrepreneurs, all from varying backgrounds, some from poverty, some from success. And we were talking about the big emotions that people have around taxes. And, I shared that, like, don't get me wrong. I don't want to pay more taxes than I have to. Let's just be really clear here. I'm not the person who's like, hey, government, take all my money. I definitely don't like it when my tax bill exceeds what I thought it would be and I have to kind of scramble. But every year that I owe taxes, I am so grateful because I grew up in an environment where I never thought I would pay taxes. Like, my mother never made enough money to owe taxes. And my friend who's the accountant is always, she's always like, okay, I don't like to pay the government either. She's like, but if you owe taxes, that means you made money. That means you have a real business.
Right.
Versus the business owners who will spend all year long so worried about going into the next tax bracket.
Right.
Right? Fearing, like they actually fear the success, right? Because,
Right. Yeah.
and it's that mindset. It's I get to versus I have to.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Same thing. I don't want to pay taxes.
Yeah.
But I'm very excited that I need to pay taxes.
Yeah.
Right? Because that means the business is making money.
Yeah. And, and when you were talking about the joy piece, right? When you start to resent the work that you're doing, and sometimes you're resenting the work, sometimes you're resenting the clients. This is something that I have seen. So among clients and peers who have been trying to reach a certain revenue threshold, like maybe they just can't get beyond 5K a month or they can't get beyond 10K a month. And then they get there. And once they get there, they've spent so long trying to hit the revenue threshold that they never stop to think about sustaining the revenue threshold, right?
Right.
Like, it's like, what you had to do to get here, chances are you can't stop doing that if you want to stay here. And then they kind of look around and they go, I'm actually delivering 4 distinctly different types of services to 5 different people. And that's how I made my 10K a month. And I can't keep doing this. And then once they hit the 10K, because 10K became the idol, they're suddenly like, not only is this not sustainable because I can't provide 4 distinct levels of service or types of services to 5 people, but 10K is actually not enough for the amount of work, time, and energy that it takes me to provide these 4 very distinct things to 5 people. And then they get into that place. But I said I'd be happy when I hit 10K. But I'm now a 6-figure business owner.
Right. This is that thing of, this is the success that we don't talk about. It doesn't feel successful, but now it is successful. But I don't want to talk about that I'm disappointed, because now that makes it look like I'm not grateful for the fact that I got there.
Right. It's everything you said, right? But wrapped up into an example that I'm just hearing a lot of. So I just want to say, if you're listening and you're like, oh my gosh, that's me. I've been working so hard to break through a revenue threshold. And now that I'm there, it doesn't feel worth it for what I've had to do to be here. We're talking to you. And so, okay, so now.
And by the way, that happens at lots of thresholds. Just FYI. So it could be 10K and it could be 50K and it could be 100K. There's a lot of thresholds here.
And it can also be hours, right? I want to work. I mean, this is a thing that I have dealt with, right? There's a certain number of hours I want to work per week. And I've had to face the fact that it's not actually the number of hours. It's what I do in the hours. There are certain things I do that I would love to do 40 hours a week. And there are certain things I do that if I had to do those for 20 hours a week, I would hate every minute of the 20 hours.
Yep. It's about the energy.
Exactly.
It's about the time.
Okay. So we've painted some pictures so that you know if we're talking to you. Now the question is, I'm going to ask the consequences. What are the consequences of staying in this place too long? I know from prior episodes, Gwen, that, you have seen that there are physical consequences, emotional consequences, sometimes relationship. I know you've talked about that quite a bit. Marriages fall apart, or even friendships can fall apart. And that diminishing return on effort. We've already talked about that loss of purpose, loss of passion. But maybe walk us through that whole thing, these consequences of living in this space of unsustainability for too long.
Well, so the first thing is, if you're in this unsustainable place, usually you want to try and fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is most people try and fix the wrong thing, which doesn't help the issue. And so then we start blaming more of the wrong thing for the problem,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, kind of going back to the example that we were just talking about, we think, oh, if I just hit, a 10K month, it's all going to be fine. And we find out it's not. And so it's like, oh, then it must be a 20K month. And so you hit a 20K month and that's not fine. And then it's like, oh, it's a 30K month. It's like, no, because probably none of this is actually about the money.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But we keep trying to fix the money.
Right.
And so the more we fix the money, we keep getting there. And that's where we get to where, we talk about at the intro of our podcast, and where we started is people say, I'm just going to burn the whole thing down and start over. And that's a bad choice, because most of the time, one of two things is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
First, either you've lost lots of assets that you didn't need to lose in the burning down. Okay, that's one. And the other is, often the business you rebuild has so many similarities that you end up getting burned out and you need to burn it.
I was going to say, you burn down and rebuild the same business over and over and over
again, right? So that's one of the biggest consequences, is that you actually get yourself into a burnout cycle. But you get excited about the new thing, and I'm starting fresh, and you get all of those things, and then you get to the stage, and then you burn yourself out, and we go around and around. So to me, that's the biggest piece that I hate seeing, because that's so completely avoidable. but
Yeah.
it's because we're trying to fix the wrong thing in the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's often because we think it's around a success goal that's not our definition of success. And the
Mm.
more we keep chasing that same success goal, we're going to keep having the same problem. So that to me is one of the biggest issues, because with all of those things, then we have all of the other issues. We have the health issues, we have the relationship issues, we have the energy issues, because we keep hitting this burnout thing again and again and again and again. And so to me, that's where the bigger problem is understanding, why are we burning,
Mm-hmm.
and what is actually driving the burnout. Not Yeah, well, that really is it. What is actually driving the burnout? What is the root cause of the burnout, not what is the symptom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But before we do, I just want to share with our listeners that we actually have an assessment and action guide for those of you who are listening and going, not only is that me, but I'm done, right? I want to break the burnout cycle and I need to break it for once and for all. So we have that. And if you go to thebusinessyoureallywant.com/burnout, you'll be able to download that. So Gwen, since you provided such a beautiful segue for us into talking about breaking the cycle, tell me what the first step is.
So the first step is to understand that you can burn out while doing what you love.
I don't like that, Gwen. No, I do not like that.
I know. It's part of why we work well together, is I say hard things
and I pout and you put up with me.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't change the fact that it's true.
And I go, yes, but I need a moment to pout and whine. And you go, okay, I'll be here when you're done.
Right. Because anything done beyond what our energy supports will burn us out, even if it's something that we love.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And what we believe in our head is, because we love it, our energy will continue for it at kind of an unlimited pace.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not true. It's just not true. And so that's usually one of the first paths we hit in burnout, is like, but I love this. I can do it all the time. I don't have to do this just 8 hours a day. I can do it 10 and 12 hours a day because I love this. I love my clients. I love what I do. I can just keep doing this. Well, no, you can't. Because at some point, it may not be this week. It may not be next week. It may not be next month. And it may not even be this year. But at some point, that's going to burn you out, because the energy is going to run out for it. And when the energy runs out, then we start resenting all of it. And when it starts running out, then the burnout hits really, really fast and hard. And that's why a lot of people get surprised by burnout, because they were doing what they love. How could I possibly get burned out by it?
Yeah, well, I would say so. In the community work I do, because people who manage online communities do suffer burnout, just like first responders and I would say medical providers do, right? People in the healthcare field. And what I have discovered is, in all those fields, there is a precursor to burnout that if you can identify it, sometimes you can stop it before it begins, and that's compassion fatigue. And how I see compassion fatigue manifest in business is things that used to feel like no sweat suddenly are just deal breakers. They are things that send you on an F-bomb rant for minutes after minutes after minutes. You're mad. You're like doing the whole like pounding the keyboard in emails. And it's like, this person has always asked these kinds of questions. They've always said these things. This client has always made those kinds of requests, and they've never been a problem before. But suddenly they are the straw that broke the camel's back. Mm-hmm. I think that tells you better than anything else that you are on a fast track to burnout, no matter what it is, what you're doing.
Yep, I would agree.
Do you have any others?
So one of the others is, and it's related, but it's a little different, which is, how do I actually feel about my work? Right. And you kind of touched on it in this example that you gave, which is, early on, it's like, oh my gosh, I love my customers. They're wonderful. Do you still love all of your customers in the exact same way? Every time that you're going to get on a call or interact with them in any way, do you say, yay, I get to? Or it's like, oh God. And, Harriet, she's going to be there. Because if you start getting one or two, then the question is, did you change or did they change? And most of the time it's us. Most of the time. And it's because what their behavior isn't quite as aligned as you'd like it to be. And back to, this is part of that compassion fatigue. Start showing up earlier with one or two people.
Right.
Right. So you start seeing it early. It's like, oh yeah, I can't deal with so and so. Or it can be the event that happens pretty consistently. And it's like, I don't want to have to deal with that ever again. Right. Same thing. Where it's not like universal. It's just, it's when it's like, oh, this doesn't feel like it used to feel before. And I think one of the other places that we get into burnout, it's partly symptom, it's partly cause, it's part of watching, is not realizing that the rest of our life is also impacting our work life.
Yeah.
Right. And so, an example, because I was just having this conversation with one of our clients, her little boy is about to start going to school. Right. And so that's going to change her energy. It might give her more energy. It might give her less energy. There's all sorts of things. What does that? And so often we burn out, not because of the business, but because we don't have the same energy to put to the business because of the other things that are taking our energy. And we forget to look at that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting you point that out, because not only do we forget to look at that as business owners, but I think we forget to look at that as professionals too.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Because what it reminds me of is there's an administrator who works at one of the schools that one of my kids goes to, and they were that person who volunteered for every event, right? Oh, I'll work the night event. I'll be in charge of this. I'll be in charge of that. And their wife had a baby last year. And I'd asked them, I was like, oh, how are things going? And they said, well, I'm volunteering for a lot less extra stuff. And I said, really? And they were very quick to be like, I still love the kids. I'm still committed to the job. I'm committed to the school 100%. Da, 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 da. But other things seem to be more important now. And I'm like, yeah, that does happen. And when they said it, it's not one of those things where I would have ever said to somebody who was expecting a child that was going to happen to them. But when they said it, instantly memories flood back and I go, oh yeah, I remember when I went through that. That's why I'm an entrepreneur.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that's one of the other things, is that we try to always pin burnout on the business, but it may not be the business that's actually burning you out.
Right.
It's that the energy that you had to put to the business, just there isn't as much of it. So the business may be burning you out, but it's not really the business's fault. You just haven't shifted enough to allow the business to be successful at this particular moment in time, stage in life, activities going on, whatever the case may be.
Yeah. So in terms of, we've talked about a variety of ways that burnout can manifest. Then we started to talk a little bit about how do you get your way out of it, right? And like you said, I really appreciate the fact that you said the first step really is understanding and accepting that you can burn out doing things you love. So I'd like to take us just one more step forward and say, okay, I'm here. I've made that recognition. What are 1 to 2 things that I could do to start to redirect the ship? Like restructure the business so I'm headed toward the path of sustainability. Because I think the other thing is we all think we're going to recognize this and wake up tomorrow and it's all going to be better. We're going to draw a line in the sand. We'll have made one different decision and it's smooth sailing from here into retirement. And maybe that's somebody's experience, Gwen, but that has never been my experience.
That could be true if retirement is like 2 or 3 months away. But back to too many variables, right? There's too many variables for it to sustain over time. Back to there's other things that are affecting how we're perceiving burnout or not that are not necessarily directly related to the business. So the first thing that I would say is you really do have to get clear on what do you want success to be for you right now in this space and time. And everyone talks about the 10-year, the 20-year, the BHAG or whatever, which is useful because that gives us a direction that we want to head. But if we aren't actually really aware of where we are now and what we need now, then we're jumping off from an inappropriate spot, right? And so great that I want to have this business, but where am I now and what can I realistically do, want, expect now, given all of the things, right? And, and one of the things that comes out in Nick Peterson's book Bumpers is he talks about what are the things, and I think this is a quote that you've really latched onto, so you'll probably do it better than I am. But what are the things that you can do today that actually completely line up with the thing that is your definition of success, right? Using my previous example where she was working all the time and not spending time with her kids so that she could have a life so that she could spend more time with the kids. Well, what she could have done is spent more time with the kids. So what are the things that you can do right now, today, that start lining up with that success? Because once you start doing that, that will ease a whole lot of the burnout pretty quickly because you're going to start feeling successful in the way that you actually feel successful. Like I had a client who really says, what I really want is an afternoon once a week where I can sleep, I can watch smutty TV, I can do whatever before the kids and the husband get home, but that would be during the workday and I can't do that. And I said, why not? She said, what do you mean, why not? And I said, what if you just planned that that's what you were going to do? But I can't. I said, try it for a month. Try 4 days. Next week, week after, and let's see what happens. Well, what she discovered was that she had so much better energy that she was actually way more productive during all of those other hours by throwing away, as it were, 4 hours.
Yeah.
In a week. That made the other 90% way, 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 way more productive. So the 10% loss of time actually, created an increase in productivity. And she was feeling better about her business, and, right? So we have to say, what does success really mean to us? And can we start doing that now?
Yeah.
And what can we do now? Because as soon as we start feeling that success, some of that overwhelm, some of this stress, some of these other things will start to drop. They'll also help us start lining up with what are the things that we want to continue to do. Because really, I think burnout is a whole lot about energy.
Yeah.
More than anything else. And so what I'm talking about is how do we do the things that start creating energy for us? And I'm not just talking about self-care, not that self-care shouldn't be a thing, but a lot of people try to fix burnout with just self-care. But if having self-care doesn't feel like success, that probably still doesn't actually fix the problem.
Right. Well, and if your definition of self-care isn't really self-care, it's just like, getting an annual mammogram, that's also not going to fix burnout.
Well, and part of it also is knowing what actually does it for you. One of my clients loves having a massage. I don't really like a massage, but I like to do the whole sensory deprivation chamber float thing.
Yeah.
But she tried it once and it made her sick. So, there's not an answer. It's about figuring out what really is the thing for us that feels like success. Right? Because I could say it would be really nice to be able to do that once a week. But it's an hour and a half away for me to do that, so I'm not going to do that. Or I could say, no, I'm going to take time to do it. I take time to do it. I don't do it every week. I would like to do it. But I don't really have time to do it every week. But I do it pretty much twice a month. Right? And so I make the choice to start doing the thing I want for the future now.
Exactly. Thank you for summing it up that succinctly, because too often, right, the default is to say, I want to do the thing. And as soon as I get to the other side, as soon as this happens and that happens, time will be there. It's like saying, I really want to work out for an hour a day. So as soon as I get a spare hour a day, I'll go to the gym. When anybody who has ever committed to fitness and sustained it can tell you that it started off by making the commitment and booking the hour a day and then doing it, right? The hour doesn't
Well, what
magically
they will
appear.
actually say is it was saying, okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is get up and walk around the block and
Mm-hmm.
take 3 minutes.
Right. But it's like you have to start doing the thing and let everything else fall around it. You can't wait for everything else to just make space.
Because it ain't going to happen.
Right. Okay. So we have talked about that, how burnout comes from this disconnect between what maybe looks successful but doesn't feel successful, right? That lack of sustainable success. We've talked about the symptoms. We've talked about the consequences. We've talked about some really good, I think, really good practical steps on starting to make your way out of it. I am wondering, because earlier you had referenced sort of measurements of success.
Mm-hmm.
So if SMART goals and maybe revenue goals are not the best ways to measure success, what are some alternatives?
So first, as a business owner, you always need to have a revenue goal because it is part of what business is about. But when you hang all of your success on that revenue goal without knowing why that revenue goal really matters to you, that's where we end up having, some issues.
Mm-hmm.
But beyond that, it really is about, I always start when people have a revenue goal, it's like, why that particular revenue goal? What does that actually mean to you? Because there's almost nobody that really is Scrooge McDuck that just wants the gold pile that they're swimming through. That the money itself
Yes.
is not the thing.
Mm-hmm.
The money is a vehicle, is a tool in their mind to something else, right? Whether
Right.
it's vacations, time with children, bigger houses, new car, doesn't matter. And I've got no judgment on what that is, but what is the money? It's paying for college, it's paying for private schools, whatever, doesn't
Yeah.
matter. What is the money? What is the why behind the money?
Mm-hmm.
Is one of the first things, because that starts getting us closer to what really matters to
Mm-hmm.
us, right? But also saying things like, I love and so, going back to the example I gave earlier, where this gal was like, I really love a good nap and just being able to like watch
Mm-hmm.
whatever I want on Netflix and not have to care what anybody else is wanting to watch. And it's like, okay, so you should be able to experience.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that does mean that you're going to have to take time out of your day. What does that mean? Well, maybe you have to work more in some other time. You may
Yeah.
have to give some give and take. But does that really make you happy? If it really makes you happy, then let's figure out how we say that is okay to be part of how I'm defining success, is that I get to do whatever this thing is. And part of that is knowing, when do I feel good
Mm-hmm.
about all of the things, right? For myself, not because I've done this for my husband, or I've done this for my child, or I've done this for my spouse, or I've done this for, my wife, or I've done this for, not that, but for myself. What feels good for myself? And then say, how do I start measuring how I feel good? Right?
Mm-hmm.
So like, I actually know I love being in, on, around water.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so I have a goal that says, I'm actually turning over here to my planner, because I actually have a goal that talks about that I will float, swim, paddleboard, be in the water, be around the beach 2, 3, or 4 times a week. That's my good, better, best goal. We talk about good, better, best goals all the time. I actually have it as a goal.
Right.
Now it's measurable. How many times was I in, around the water? It's a very measurable thing because we actually live in the center of a desert. So,
I was like, you have to work at that.
So it's not like just a default kind of situation. And so it's actually a goal for me because I know when I'm doing that, I feel better. Right. I also have a meditation goal. How many times do I actually meditate in the morning? Because I know I do better when I meditate in the morning. It's one that I have to work at a little bit more. It's not quite as satisfying, but I know I do better for it. And it allows me to stay more centered and to be more present for my clients, which is what I really want. I want to be super present for my clients. And so part of this is setting goals that also are related to the other aspects, right? So, I don't have kids, you have kids. So one of your goals, I happen to know, is that you are able to do kid drop off and pick up on a pretty consistent basis. Like you aren't having to have other people do kid drop off and pick up. So that becomes a goal, and it actually becomes part of a business goal. Right. And so that means I'm going to design my business in such a way that I can do that, even when we have early pickup and half days and, all the other things that I know you have to deal with because we talk about it, on a regular basis. Right. But setting those as goals and saying, am I actually hitting the goal that actually matters to me right now? Because, of course, designing your life so that your business is successful enough so that you can do kid pickup and drop off when your youngest is a senior in high school is not actually that useful.
Right.
Because you've missed all of it up until then.
Very, very true. So what I'm hearing is, creating a business that feels as good on the inside as it looks on the outside is possible.
But it also may not look successful to anybody else, and you have to be okay with it.
Okay, you have to say something more. I was going to say something else, but you've got to go with that.
So I'm going to pick on you for a minute.
Why not? I'm an easy target.
Well, and I know enough about you and your business that I can actually pick on you, right? So there would be people who, if they looked at your business, would say, well, her business isn't successful. She's not at this level of revenue. She's not doing this. She's working these hours. There's all sorts of things. But that's not true for you because you're making some very specific choices around those things so that you're actually achieving your real definition of success. And if you got caught up in other people saying, yeah, but that's not really successful, you should be making X amount by this time, then you're going to feel not successful from other people's. You have to say, nope, I know that my definition is my definition of success. And, for example, I could never possibly understand it because I don't have kids. I don't have any interest in doing pickup and drop off. Right. And knowing that it's okay that I don't understand your definition of success.
Yeah.
And being completely okay with it. That's the other thing. Because as soon as we get worried about, this is back to the very beginning, nice loop around. When we get worried about how other people are comparing us or how they're comparing them to us, we're going to lose.
Yeah.
Two completely different individuals.
Yeah. So really what you're saying is that a business that feels as good on the inside as it looks on the outside requires intentional choices.
Yep.
What I heard is boundaries. And I want to say sometimes difficult, but personally for me, always difficult boundaries. And a willingness to measure success differently. Maybe differently than you have in the past, but definitely differently than others do around you.
And definitely what you're seeing in the ether out there. That's just a very generic definition of success. It is not a specific.
Yeah. But if you do it, the reward is you've built, I hate to rob from the show's title, but you build the business you really want, which serves your life rather than consuming your life. Because all of us, that's really what we want from success.
Yeah, it is. Why do this if you're miserable?
Why do this indeed, Gwen? I've asked myself that several times over the years. Okay, our time is up. And if you recognize yourself in today's conversation and you want to transform your business and you want something that supports your well-being while still delivering excellent results by your definition, I can't recommend anything more than a little self-reflection. And we have an assessment and an action guide to support you in doing that. It is called Breaking the Burnout Cycle. And to access that, go to thebusinessyoureallyWant.com/burnout. Details are there, and you can get that free in your email. All right, Gwen, I'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to The Business You Really Want with Gwen Bortner. I'm Tonya Kubo, reminding you that sustainable success is within reach. Make sure to subscribe to the show and visit thebusinessyoureallywant.com for more resources. Until next time, keep dreaming big and acting with intention.